Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. It is Tuesday, isn't it? I think. Good to see you. Let's see who's here. I thought I was going to have a thing. I thought I was going to have a computer thing right there. Got my heart pumping a little bit, but we're good. Let's see who's on to say good morning. Good morning, Anita. Good to see you. Good afternoon. You're right. Sunny today in London, Ontario, Canada. I hope so too. I just got right before I logged on. I just got a message that there was, there are cases of what reported all the time, right? But it's worrying because there was one reported at the dance studio downstairs where Joss takes her lessons. So I think I'm gonna just as a precaution, because you know how crazy I get, particularly about Teddy with his breathing. I think I'm gonna schedule a test, but hopefully healthy. Hopefully healthy. Looking forward to that booster, man. Looking forward to all of this being behind us, right, for the most part. Do you think we'll ever get to a place again in our lives where you're comfortable in a huge group, like a concert, everybody breathing and singing and shouting and spitting in your face? I mean, I don't know if I'm ever going to not have these terrible overtones and associations and worry kind of things. I keep seeing these commercials for, people panicking more than usual, more than normal life right now because of all these worries and thoughts, big thoughts. And I just wonder as time goes on, if I'm so careful in all situations, even outside, but real cognizant of where I'm standing and how close I am to people. And I don't think that's ever going to change. I think that we are, isn't it funny to think that we ever were in a place where people just were sick, like the kids going to school. It was like, unless their head was hanging on by a thread, they really wanted them at school. And I would call some mornings and say, listen, Teddy's got a very sniffly, runny nose. He's kind of a hot mess. And they'd be like, well, if it's just a runny nose, go ahead and send him in. We have Kleenex here. And now it's like, you call and say to them, he's got a sore throat, and they're like, keep him away, keep him. And I just wonder when that pendulum is going to swing and what's going to happen then, because it is just so, I feel like I'm living right on the edge right now. Kira, good morning, and sunny day in Plymouth. Sounds good. The mama bear. I was just talking to the mama bear on my way over. Good afternoon. Beautiful sunsplash day. It is a beautiful autumn day today. I don't know what's going on. Did we not get a huge fall foliage thing in New England this year? Because I'm seeing I can see the sumac turned red, and I can see a lot of yellow from birches, but I'm not seeing those red maples doing their things this year. I have not seen any stellar, in-your-face, full-blast red maple, the whole three-color kind of montage happening on any street in any state so far. I wonder, maybe it's just not the year for the full-blast Technicolor. Kirsten, happy, lovely, chilly day in Vermont. And that's another thing, isn't it? For me here, the temperature plummeted 30 degrees since yesterday. It's pretty remarkable. I love it. Comfortable, but it's pretty remarkable. Beverly, good to see you. Good to see you. A bit warmer for you there today. Good morning, Donna. Good to see you. And Linda, sunny day in New Jersey. Crystal, good to see you. I almost wore it today. Tomorrow maybe is the day. When I took Teddy out, it was 44 this morning, dropping him off. It was quite a drop. Oh, just catching up on your comments. Robin, good to see you. Happy morning. Oh, Dave, good to see you. I saw a lot of buddies were on buying bingo tickets for this Friday night. Friday night, Halloween/autumn themed bingo night. What a fun, colorful night it's going to be. Whether it's colorful or not outside your window, it's going to be colorful on Friday night. All of these beautiful rugs that Kira picked, absolutely gorgeous. I can't wait to look at them and talk about them, look at them together. Joy, good to see you. I was going back and forth with your sister this morning. Catherine, good to see you. Rainy Idaho, but you love the rain. It is nice sometimes, isn't it? Especially overnight. Tad, good to see you. Great day to be out dog walking. Oh, that sounds so good, doesn't it? I love your posts. I always see them, and I always agree. My phone has a crack in the screen. I don't know if I told you this. I dropped it. You'd think it would be one of the kids. I dropped it. It was a long time ago, but all of a sudden, I don't know how this works, but tiny crack. You can't even see it. It's off to the side. But all of a sudden, my phone, the last couple of weeks, is just calling people I wouldn't normally call, you know, like related to the school and related to special education, PTA, and things like that. And I'm thinking, oh, God, I hope it's not calling people I'm in the car and they can hear me in the background kind of thing, because you just never know what I'm going to say. I'm very good when I'm live for the most part, but when I'm not, it could be anything. It could be anything. But it's been doing a lot of that. I guess I'm going to have to put some time aside to buy a screen, right? What a world. Angel, good to see you. Hello in New Jersey. Linda is also in New Jersey. 2 buddies on from the Garden State. Yeah, a lot of anxiety. I feel it too. I'm feeling it more and more with everything being open. Let's see. We got a lot of comments this morning. You know, it could be, Tad. I never know how this works. I should really consult the Farmer's Almanac, right? Because it would probably say right up front what the formula is for warm versus cold, wet versus dry, early versus late, to get these colors out of the leaves. Because it doesn't make sense to me. The only thing I understand about the changing of the leaves is that when we see these beautiful autumn colors, I know from reading that those are actually the color of the leaves, but the chlorophyll, the green in the leaves, for such a good part of the year, because it's sort of activated by the sun, overrides the color that the leaf actually is. So when there's less sun, right, later in the year, like now, a little bit less sun every day, a little bit less each day, you know, the chlorophyll isn't so present, and then starts to break down, and we see these beautiful colors. But I don't know. I would think that the sooner it starts to be cooler, the sooner we would start seeing the colors, and the longer we might see them, because as soon as it starts raining like crazy, of course, they all get blown down and we lose them that way, or when it's super windy, we lose them that way. I don't have the exact science to it, but I'd like to read more on that subject, because it is interesting to know what you can expect, to see if you get what you can expect. You never get what you expect in life, do you? Barbara, good to see you. You had maple blight. Oh, you're kidding, on your street. So the leaves turned in August. Interesting. Isn't that is interesting. The reds are my favorites, I have to say. And the sumac does a lot, but it's a much smaller, typically much smaller tree or huge bush. Excited for bingo. Me too. Catherine, good morning. Good to see you. Pat, good morning. Hi from Hamilton. First day of needing the furnace. I see the wink, right? It's that time. Oh, how fun. Jennifer, good to see you. Good to see all the buddies. So, you know, today I was sort of agonizing about what to cover, and I thought, not agonizing, I just wanted to do something fun. And I realized that I have been hoarding and sitting on a bunch of tips from Donna. She sends me tips weekly, and I keep meaning to put up a kind of Donna's Corner, Whispering Hills Corner. I was thinking of doing the little Nancy Drew silhouette with Donna's Corner, because Whispering Hills to me still sounds like the title of a Nancy Drew book. But she sends me tips all the time, and they are fantastic expert hooking tips. So I thought, let's look at some of those together today. Let's look at some tips. Let's brainstorm some tips. This is such a good, open, eager group for sharing information. And whether we're talking about rug hooking or punch needle or latch hook or locker hook or whatever it is that you do, nobody is going to say, oh, I don't want to hear about that. If you have a great tip, please contribute it to the thread so I can read that tip out too. We can all see it here, but later when it's recorded, I don't think people can see the text anymore. So I thought, let's have a day of sharing some tips. And if we get some time, we can look at this little periodical I found. There are some lovely little rugs in it. But let's look at some tips. And I want to start by saying that when somebody gives you a tip, right, it's always a positive thing. It's always a plus. It's always a gift. At the same time, my way of doing something is different than your way of doing something. Even holding a hook, my way is different than yours. It might look like our hands are doing the same thing, but they're not. So in every case, every time, tips are great, because sometimes it's like that old Mr. Rogers, right, sort of adage that once in a while somebody says the right thing at the right time, and it sinks in and you run with it, and it's a real gift. And another time somebody could say the same thing to you or say it in a different way, and you wouldn't get as much out of it, right? That's just life, right? That's life, that's relationships, that's religion, that's crafts, that's everything. So some of these tips might strike you today as being, that's exactly what I needed to hear, and others not so much. But maybe other people will go, oh, God, I got that, right? So let's share as many tips as we can today, and I'll be looking for yours in the sidebar too. My hair is still wet. Jill, good to see you back in Virginia after New York State and W. And W. What's the W part? Had a lovely time and talked with a few rug hooking vendors. Oh, was that the fair? Was that the fair? The fair in New York State? Was that the Finger Lakes Fair? It was the Fiber Festival, wasn't it? It was this. I know it was this weekend because I wanted to go and I couldn't because of my teaching date. Bought a few things. Glad to be home. Can't wait to be punching again. Oh, how fun! Being different makes it art. That is so true, Kira. So what I mean is tips are with a grain of salt, aren't they? Because it is nice to file them. This is a good time to get a piece of paper and a pencil, right? It's a good time to file them for next time. When someone who is I'm going to read Donna's first, and then I'm hoping I'm going to see some on the side. When somebody has been hooking as long as Donna has and has taught as much as Donna has, this is like a gold mine. This is a wealth of information that she's been sending. And all interesting things. But I'm going to look for your comments nonetheless in the sidebar, because even if you're a beginner, it might be not that you disagree with the tip, but you can build on the tip, or you found another way to do the exact same thing. And we want to hear all of the ways, right? Sheep and wool. Oh, right, sheep and wool, of course. New York State. New York Sheep and Wool Festival. Oh, I bet it was great. I bet it was great. I'm going to have to not book anything on that weekend next year. So first tip of the morning. She says, line boxes of wool with newspapers. Moths hate printer's ink. Did you know that? I did not know that. I don't get a newspaper. This is a good reason to get a newspaper. Moths hate printer's ink. How interesting is that? And you know, I'm going to build on that and say, always good tips, right? When I think about that, I also think about the fact that the commercial patterns that are pre-printed, there is something about that ink too that's different. I'm sure we all have different opinions on this, but one of the three reasons I haven't switched to having my commercial patterns that I send out to you printed. Number one, the expense. Number two, I'm always very worried that it's not going to be squared perfectly. Number three, the smell, because I've heard some people say that the smell of that ink really gets to them. And that worries me because that doesn't have a shape in my mind. I don't know how many people feel like that because I don't detect any smell from the ink. But if it is a thing about ink, I would think that commercial patterns would be using ink, an extra reason that moths would stay off of them. Because I'm sure Don is right. I'm sure that this idea of lining your wool boxes and all that with newspaper to be anti-wool, I'm sure she's onto something there. Good use of grocery flyers. That's true. That's true. Interesting, right? That's a good one to start with. Another one of her great tips. Oh, Kirsten says, super important tips. Moths are small. They can do a lot of damage. You know, that's a good point, Kirsten. I know Kirsten's in a struggle, in a battle to the death with the moths right now. It's been going on for a while, and it is like scary, scary. But, you know, it's worth saying because I also panic when I see a moth, right? I think we all panic when we see moths because we're not just worried about our supplies, which are going to be cut up anyway. At least, that's what I'm thinking. I'm worried about my finished pieces, and I'm worried about my older finished pieces. And I always find it so shocking when I go to an antique store, particularly the antique malls that are a bit more anonymous, right? And you pick up a rug and a bunch of these tiny moths fall off of it and a bunch of sort of dust on the floor, which is like the wool that somebody hooked 100 years ago. It's a terrible sight. But the moths that are, as far as I know, the moths that I see eating things, like Kirsten says, are very small. So when I see a giant moth make its way in here, like Mothman versus Godzilla kind of thing, it still worries me because it's still a moth. And I don't like any bugs in here. There was a centipede on the wall this morning, and I almost lost my mind. I don't like any bugs inside, but really the small moths, you want to be really careful and be watching out for those. There's going to be more moth tips, but put your moth tips into the bar too. Crystal says, I wonder if a newspaper type ink might rub off on pale wool over time. I think it must, right? I think it must do that. I wonder if you could do something where, like lingerie bag material, like the netting that has the holes. I wonder if you could do the lining, but then do a second lining. This is a lot of work, isn't it? But I mean, anything anti-moth is worth the work. if you could do a second lining, like just opening up one of those, get a big lingerie bag or something, maybe put it on top of the newspaper. But I agree with you. I would be worried about the ink rubbing off because it rubs off on your hands and it rubs off on silly putty, right? So it makes me think it rubs off on anything, definitely light wool. Catherine says, I would put the rug in the freezer. Yeah. If it's already massive infestation, you would put the rug in the freezer. So I was talking to one of my buddies. I'm not gonna drop names because moths are such a terrible subject. But I was talking to one of my buddies who has a rug store and has for years, right? Not Donna. And we were talking about moths because she said one year, and this is not recently, again, not Donna, somebody must have come in with a coat or something that had moths in it. Somebody brought moths into her store, and it was a rug hooking store. So she said it took her months to get rid of those moths. It was a nightmare. She washed everything multiple times. She put as much as she could in the freezer, but being a whole store, it was obviously a huge amount of wool. And she said it was the theme of like the better part of half of a year, trying to get them out of the store, get everything washed, get the last one gone so she could be like selling wool again. So it is a scary prospect, isn't it? And you know, and Kirsten says, yeah, a freezer will work, but again, it depends on the quantity. When you receive an old rug in the mail, you know, that's a good question, Kira. When you receive an old rug in the mail that you purchased online, do you ensure that no moths come with it? I mean, I shake it out. I look at it in great detail. If I have any question, if there's any kind of dust or fiber coming off of it, like pieces dropping off, I'll definitely put it in the freezer. We have a second refrigerator downstairs with a big freezer. But I look really carefully. And for times when I picked up large amounts of wool and rug from people who said, like, it's for sale, do you want to come and buy it? Go and buy everything and end up with many garbage bags of rugs kind of thing. I left that wool and that's not wool that I would kit, right? Because that's like braiding wool and stuff I used to do my prototypes. And then I would dye matches and kit stuff that way. I would typically use door wool only, unless I'm doing checks or, you know, plaids or something like that. But for myself, I want that wool and I want to use that wool. So I left it out there all winter in those garbage bags just to be sure with the freezing that anything that might have been in there was dead. I went through the bags multiple times, but I didn't like bring it inside and put it on the bed and start rootling, because at that point, if there are moths, oh, there they go, right? So yeah, I'm really careful myself for things I bring into the house and into the studio. And if I have any question, it goes into a crazy quarantine for like a huge amount of time, like 6 months minimum for me. Yeah, freeze seems to be the general consensus. And Doreen says, be careful with Christmas trees and wreaths as they carry moths and eggs. Doreen, that's a great tip. I didn't know that. You mean artificial Christmas trees, that kind of thing? And wreaths? Let me know if you mean artificial, because that is worrying. I have a lot of those old feather trees and a lot of artificial trees and stuff. Didn't even think of that. Crystal says, maybe you could keep predatory animals like birds and bats around the house. It's a good tip. Yeah, I wish my lazy dog and cat would go after moths, right? They don't even go after centipedes. Oh, Suze, how about cedar shavings in a laundry bag? That's a great one. Cedar shavings in a laundry bag is a great one. So, you know, this is like, let's talk about cedar. We haven't said that before. Let's talk about cedar for a while. You know, when I think about cedar, I want to show you one of the things I got on Amazon. I've got about, honestly, 100 of these. I just ordered these guys on Amazon, the moth cakes, right? Because when you buy them in quantity, they're not super expensive. And the reason I like the moth cakes is I like the smell. Like, as smells go, right? It's not like Chanel No. 5, but it's not super full blast cedar or mothball smell either. It's kind of faint and powdery. You might not like the smell, disclaimer, but I do. So I buy tons of these and I just stick them everywhere, right? Because this is business for me. So I'm super serious about that. But the thing about cedar, and I love the smell of cedar. In fact, this time of year, I wear a perfume that includes the smell of cedar, just so I'm walking around kind of crop dusting in a nice way and carrying with me the smell of the cedar as I go. Because I love the smell of cedar, but I don't love the smell of cedar in the summer because it reminds me too much of, like, I associate it with fall and winter, right? And as soon as I hit spring, it's the cat in the litter box thing. I'm out and I want different smells. So cedar is a great one, and cedar is effective. I've heard a lot of people say also that lavender is really effective, but I have to say, I'm just putting it out there and I'm looking for feedback. How effective can it be? I mean, because if it were super effective, wouldn't everybody always have used lavender sachets and never used cedar or mothballs? I don't know, but I'm looking for your impact with this. I do like the cedar shavings, particularly at this time of year. And another cedar thing that I like to do is, you know, I have those, I think I did a video of it or a coffee time a long time ago, where I have the small felt balls, right? The small felt balls. I was talking about those yesterday. Not the big dryer ones, but the small ones. You can get like 1-inch ones or 3/4 or 1.5-inch felt balls. And I dye them like for fun with my leftover water that's on the stove. I just throw those in too, dye them, and then I soak them. Well, not soak them, but I because somebody told me not to soak them on coffee time. I use my dropper to drop cedar oil onto them, and I string them into a garland with like heavyweight kind of upholstery thread, and I put garlands around my areas too. So those smell like cedar all year round, and they look very pretty. And when I feel like they're losing their pizzazz, I get the dropper out with the cedar oil that I bought on Amazon, and I drop that onto the balls again. Give them another kick. So I'm not gonna say anything along the lines of so far so good. I'm not gonna go too far with that because Murphy is always listening. But these few things that I have done have been okay so far. Just I'm not gonna go too far with that. But so far so good. Let's see, Crystal, you got some people laughing. Pat says my wool storage is in a building that sees a deep freeze over the winter. Nice. I've never had a moth problem after many years, including several dirty old rugs. There you go, right? So there is a finite solution, right? It's, I guess everybody's big fear is like the introduction, accidentally introducing, like into that rug hooking store. It's a scary thing. The prospect, Kirsten says, wool moths love feathers. I had to throw out every cat toy with feathers. Interesting. Those little star, asterisk, asterisk. Jill says you can also put it in the oven at a low temperature. The lowest temperature you can do is like 150 or 200 for a long time. Interesting. Interesting. That's another fantastic new one. Moths sleep better with lavender, Catherine says. I know, right? Me too. Me too. You know what I wish worked? Do you know those sachets of like the balsa wood? They have such an evergreen, kind of a powdery, a cross between, remember that old perfume, Ombre Rose? For me, it's like a cross between Ombre Rose and like evergreens. Balsam sachets are just the best. But as far as I know, they do nothing against moths, except maybe relax them. Make them feel like they're in a spa, right? That's just what we need. Cedar oil. Yep, cedar oil is great. And it's inexpensive. And of course, it's super concentrated. Beverly says, I store my wool strips in glass jars and yarn and fabric and seal. Yep, all these kinds of the meal bags and the bags you can seal and in jars. That's a really good idea. If you can find those jars, again, if you are on Facebook Marketplace and you want to check locally for those giant mason jars, because you can store a lot of strips in those and still keep everything color coded. You know, if you're buying them and paying for shipping, they become expensive. But if you find somebody who's all done with canning and jarring, you might be able to buy like 50, mason jars in your immediate local area and put your strips in those. That's a great idea because then you don't even have to worry about those. You can keep them from year to year that way. That's really good. Kirsten says, I can say from painful experience that the cedar and or lavender in sachet size were not effective. My wool items in my one cedar chest were untouched. I think you need a lot of cedar to work with. That's probably true because I have to say, not recently, thank goodness, but I have to say in the past like years ago when I was touring and I was on the road all the time, and I had sometimes my wool jackets, like blazers and stuff, if you can even say blazers anymore. And sometimes I'd have like the cedar thing that goes around the coat hanger in it. And I noticed that sometimes they would still have holes in them, like at the end of the season. And I thought, how can these have holes in them? I have like a cedar thing around the hanger. Maybe you do need tons and tons, right? But the thing about the cedar chest is that it's also shut, right? So it's like they're enclosed, which makes me wonder, cedar is just having like shavings or the wood cedar around, unless, like Kirsten says, you've got tons of it. Like, is that going to be effective enough for a rug hooker who is going to have a lot of wool? I wonder. I wonder. You all are kicking in some unbelievable tips. So if you think more thoughts on that subject, just put them in there and I'll go back to them. So printer's ink, newspaper, cedar, maybe a little bit of lavender, but not on a grand scale. Lots of tips. Freezing, oven, lots of great tips just came up there. That was a super conversation. So another gem from Donna. She says, lift spots from a rug by using cornstarch paste. Interesting. So I'm looking forward to comments on this because I'm thinking, of course, it must matter what the spots are, right? Blood or like Chef Boyardee. I would think that these are things I'm thinking of from my house. These would be tough ones as opposed to example like I don't know, a little bit of coffee. I don't know. I wonder if it will work for everything. So if you have a comment on that subject, please let us know. I have to say I've never used cornstarch paste, I don't think, for anything. So I don't have any idea of how effective it is and how useful it can be. This sounds like one, I'm sure she's absolutely right, but I just wonder how big of a stain, how much of a stain, how old of a stain, how intense of a stain, how colorful of a stain, all those kinds of things, I wonder. Barbara says, how long do moth cakes last? That's a good question. I ordered these maybe a month ago and 2 months ago. I just keep adding to the stash. It does say no clinging odor. I'm seeing if it has any kind. This particular one is by Enoz, E-N-O-Z, since 1918. Let me change my glasses and let me see if they give us something a bit more like an expiration date. This would be the one time in my life that I pay attention to expiration dates. This is probably why I always have a raging stomachache, because I'm constantly eating stuff that is way past expiration. So let's see. There's a lot of first aid tips, like for example, if you rub it on your eye, or if you swallow it, if you use it as a snack. Okay, so you're not really supposed to touch it, so I'm going to keep my hand off of it. Sounds like it's a no-touch item. You're just supposed to hang it. Open plastic hanger, unwrap cake. While holding cake by the cellophane wrapper, transfer back to plastic. Vapors work downward. Space for a minimum of 7 days. Keep product in an airtight space for a minimum of 7 days when cake has... So you wait for the cake to dissolve. With this one, you wait for the cake to dissolve. Since moths are active all year, replenish airtight containers and bags 2 times a year. So at that point, you could get a different cake and open it up and put that cake inside. I didn't realize that the cakes were quite so bad to touch. I've just been touching them and probably, but nothing happened. So it sounds like there are directions on that brand. There's probably different directions from brand to brand, but that's a good starting point. Okay, Crystal says, I've heard of baking soda paste, but not cornstarch. Exactly. Now I can't really think of what the difference is between those two things. Not a baker or a cleaner. Dave says, use whitening toothpaste, not gel, to remove unpleasant odors and dye coloring from hands. Okay, that is a good one. Catherine says, I think the lesson here is that no art is meant to last forever. That's true, isn't it? That's true. Absolutely. That reminds me of a great thing I don't want to forget. And Crystal says, after an unfortunate blueberry incident, there's the title of your memoir right there, I had someone message me and say that pouring boiling water over fresh fruit stains, not cold water. Oh, to pour it over fresh fruit stains. Oh, okay, so instead of using cold water, like dab, 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 to do boiling water. Interesting. Okay, that is a good tip. That comment about art just reminded me, I'm being mindful of the time because I'm going to speed it up. I read this great quote this weekend. I have this email sort of club thing that they send a quote a day. I probably got it from my mom, but I get a quote a day, and usually the quotes are a bit too transcendental or a bit too sort of Chinese restaurant wonton cracker cookie thing. But this one really struck me because it was about art, right? And it went like this. It was so good. It said, okay, wait a minute. It said, every piece of art is autobiographical. The pearl is the oyster's autobiography. And I thought, isn't that fantastic? Because when we think of the work we do and the art that we do, even if it's a commercial pattern and you're just coloring it in with your artistic eye, it is unique, it is special, it is yours, it is your autograph. I thought, what a cool thing. Even the pearl is the oyster's autobiography, the whole story of what they've been working on. Such a pretty idea, isn't it? Oh, Crystal, you didn't finish there. Sorry. Yes, boiling water over fresh fruit stains should help remove the stain. Cold water would set the stain. Interesting. Okay, so that is a good one. That is a good one. Interesting. I feel like I should know these from working in the theater and having a degree in costume, but to be honest, we rarely washed things in the theater. We would be more likely to unpick a costume, sort of cannibalize it and remake it as the costume for the next week. So I rarely came upon these moments of having to do cleaning unless it was somebody smoking in a costume and then getting a cigarette burn. We rarely came across this stuff. So this is all new to me. Oh, it's a good one, right, Mom? So let's finish up with Donna's. We're doing some good brainstorming today, and I'm learning a lot. I hope you are too. So, okay, so this is interesting too. And Dave, that thing about that whitening toothpaste, it seems like that whitening toothpaste has a ton of different uses, doesn't it? But the one that my dentist told me not to use it for is my teeth. They said that whitening toothpaste is too aggressive really to use as toothpaste. So I thought, interesting. Still have it, but going to use it for some other things. Not going to use it on my teeth anymore. Next tip, she says, touch up a rug. Okay, color-wise, touch up a rug with a toothbrush dipped in dye. Now, we've talked about this many a time, and I have not gotten to that house rug yet. So she's saying, use a toothbrush dipped in dye. So you've already done your dye, mixed your dye, right? Hot water's got it going. It's all activated. It's all even and stirred, shaken, not stirred, and you're ready to go. So she's saying using a little toothbrush is a good way to, I think what she's probably thinking of is getting a very localized small amount into a very small area. And that reminds me again, I am going to use these guys. This was the set I couldn't find when we talked about this last. Amazon, I think toothbrush is a great idea, not taking away from that, just building onto that. Amazon sells these sets. It's a ton, right? They give you a ton of these pens, and they're all empty pens with a reservoir, right? So this brand was called, it looks like Oku or Uku, O-O-K-U. Ordered it on Amazon Prime. All of them are different. So when you undo them, for example, that's a nice flat brush, right? Not coming into focus, but with this, all of these are empty reservoirs. So you unscrew them, right? And you literally put your color in here. Now it can't be boiling at that point because it will implode, right? It will implode. So once you set your color, you got a good even stir going. There's not sediment. It's all in there good, mixed up. Wait for it to cool off, or even put it in the freezer until it's cool enough that you could put it in something like this. And then I would say, I would be more likely to try these kinds of things first because you get this kind of action, right? Where'd you go? He's so little you can't see him. That's a super finey. I mean, right, if you just wanted a little bit, your dye is in here and it's going to come out just a little bit as you go. I don't know because I haven't done it yet, as you can see. But having a nice bag like this, I mean, this costs like nothing, and it's seven different ones they give you. You could really, I think, I should ask Judy Taylor, right? She's the sort of master of restoration. But I like the idea of a toothbrush, but I'm more curious about using these at this moment. Okay, so let me catch up. Tad says, everything you create is an autobiography, and every autobiography is fiction. That's a great point too, right? Because you're just presenting the things that you want people to see, the things that you have no intention of sharing. Those things are well hidden up, right? We keep all that stuff well hidden, as we should, right? Otherwise, you just let your crazy pour out all over the place. That is a nice comment. Kira says, I have red dye on white snow. Could I use bleach diluted? Kira, I'm going to let somebody else answer that because I don't know. I have had that with a Christmas rug, and I unpicked the white snow near the red dress and rehooked it because I was too scared. But I'm worried about the bleach getting through to an older backing like a burlap backing. That's what I'm worried about with that. Let me see what somebody more knowledgeable about this says, because I'd be curious about that too. Bleach is so aggressive. That's the thing that worries me here. Jill says, doesn't the whitening toothpaste have bleach in it? Wouldn't it bleach your wool? I don't know if whitening toothpaste has bleach in it, or if it's, the dentist led me to believe it's just very abrasive. I don't know if it also has bleach. Some of them do, obviously, like whitening things, not necessarily the toothpaste, but that stuff you brush on that looks like whiteout. That's definitely got bleach in it, whitening agents. But it sounded to me, the only thing I got out of that conversation with the dentist was that it was super abrasive and sandy and takes the enamel off your tooth. So I'm not sure. Yeah, you could always rehook it. Rehooking it is safe. I worry about what's under it and losing the integrity to your backing piece. That's the part that really gets me going and gets the sleeping pills out, when I think about those kinds of thoughts. So let's see, vintage, this is another tip. Vintage coloring books make a good source for design elements when trying to design your own rug. That is true, absolutely. And now that we are on the internet and everybody is in such huge numbers, we have so many images of vintage coloring books. Now, if you are doing commercial patterns, this could still be problematic, of course, right? Just because it's vintage doesn't mean it's out of copyright. But as you know, if you are doing things for yourself in your bedroom wall, you do what you do, we don't know what you do. Shouldn't even say it, but I'm saying it. And you keep it off Facebook, because otherwise your fan club sends you a bunch of Valentines to let you know you did something wrong. So still be careful about copyright if you're looking at any vintage image. But if it's just for you and you have a nice nostalgic children's book or postcard or vintage coloring book like Don is saying, those are good places to go for ideas, because they are so charming, and simple lines too, right? Simple lines. Kirsten says, Dave says, bleach on protein fibers like wool will dissolve it. Best to avoid it. Good one. Kirsten says, I thought bleach dissolved wool. Yep, same thought. Great minds are thinking alike right here. Crystal says, I think Tiana's right. First time for everything, right? I think it would compromise the fiber. Yeah, I'm more worried about that than about the wool going to pot, because of course the wool can be replaced, but the backing, once you do something that compromises the integrity of the backing, then you've got a restoration project, not just a hook in a few loops. So that always scares me. Club soda helps pet stains in a rug. Okay, so this is like if you get like a pee-pee pants come and do their job all over your rug, then you're thinking about stains probably smell too. So she's saying club soda would work for that. That's a good one. And another one. Okay, so this one is about hooking Oriental rugs, right, in the style of Oriental rugs. As a rule, Oriental rugs are hooked in 3 colors using any number of shades of these 3 colors. So that's a good one. That's an old-timey one for sure. So she's saying, for example, if you were doing an Oriental rug, for lack of a better word, because we still use that phrase. If you were doing, for example, maroon, blue, and yellow, you could also do, for maroon, cranberry, eggplant, whatever, pink, blue, stone blue, gray blue, Payne's blue, mist gray, and, for your yellow, like sunflower yellow, mustard, old gold, nugget gold, like all of these old colors, right? But you would just choose the 3 basic colors as umbrellas, and then you would choose all your mixed colors underneath. We did that with the Abenaki rugs. There was a few main colors, because of course I went straight from Helen Albee's dyeing papers to make those Abenaki colors when we did that earlier in the year. And it was the same kind of idea. There was like 2 or 3 pinks, and they worked really well together. Even though they fought each other, they worked well together as a complement. And same with the blues and same with the yellows in that family too. So I think that's a very good tip. I never would have thought of that on my own. Or you could just learn how to love the red snow. It's got, yes, but if you are taking it out and rehooking it, it's going to give it such a nice pop. It's going to give it such a new life. We could get together, Kira, and I'll bring my snowy rugs with bleeding, and we could just sit and have a repair snowy bloody rug day, right? We could turn it into an unofficial holiday, snowy bloody rug day, and nobody will know what that's about. It will sound like something Stephen King. And I think this might be 2 more. 1 yard of yarn is approximately enough yarn to do 2.5 inches of whip stitching. So she's talking about finishing the border if you're whip stitching, 1 yard is enough to do 2.5 inches. That's a good number to write down, because that's always a thing. Now, of course, this is going to depend on how thick your yarn is. Is she working with 2-ply yarn, 3-ply yarn, 4-ply yarn? But use it as a gauge, as a guide, right? And just say, I'm going to cut 1 yard of yarn, hook it, and see if you're at that 2.5 inches. If your yarn is a little bit thinner, you might have to do more like it only goes 1 inch, right? Or 2 inches. But gauge it. Start with that 1 yard measure. I think that's a good policy, and figure out how far that gets you. That's a good tip. Doreen says, Kara, don't eat yellow snow or red. That eternal tip, right? It is an antique. The kids still love when it snows, bringing in snow and sprinkling sugar on it, or sprinkles like ice cream sprinkles. It's so fun to do, but only the white snow, because the dog is always back there. Kira says it's an antique rug, so I'm worried about the trouble that it'll cause with unhooking. We can do that together. Let's do that together, because what we'll probably want to do with that, I don't know if it's backed or not, the rug that you're talking about with this bleeding problem, but I think what we'll certainly want to do with that is clip the loops in the front and really carefully try to pull them out that way. If it's not backed, I'd be tempted, if it is backed, I'd be tempted to peel the backing away a little bit, just so we can, I don't want to go pulling and having multiple loops come up, kind of like, underground stream. I'd rather pull them loop by loop, because the backing's probably old. So I want to do as much kind of careful, localized work as possible, getting the loops out individually, and give no strain to the background. We can do it together. And maybe we'll make a video when we do it. That'd be fun. And last tip of the day, when hooking cats, now this is going to be partly opinion, so grain of salt. When hooking cats, don't hook the whiskers, because your eye will fill that in. The cat looks much better not having those lines across the face. I just read that. I hadn't read these yet. So, wah, wah. I still haven't finished my Maud Lewis, but you can see I'm clearly hooking lines across the face. I think depends on what you like kind of a tip, because I do depends on how graphic you like to work, because Donna does do this sort of Proma Gown school. She's a Proma Gown certified teacher, wonderful teacher, super knowledgeable, but she is of that school, and she always works in a very realistic style with a lot of shading. So if you are working in a more graphic style, like French poster style, you probably want the whiskers, and it's completely up to you. Whiskers or no whiskers, it's completely up to you. But if you do like to work in a realistic style, I'm sure that this tip about not hooking the whiskers, because the eye kind of sees them without them being there, is a good tip. And that probably holds true for many things that you might or might not hook, right? Let me see. Let me catch up before I log off. Pat says, if you're lucky enough to have or find DD7, DIDI, it's always worked for me on the toughest stains. Sadly, it's no longer available. That I've never heard of that, Pat. I'm going to check that out just in case it's at, for example, like the Vermont Country Store or something like that. It might be, I never understand how businesses like the Vermont Country Store and these old country stores in general are able to stock products like Ombre Rose perfume, like Tangy lipstick, like, gee, your hair smells nice, was that shampoo? I never understand how they're able to stock that, because who's making it to supply it, right? If the business has been defunct for like decades, I always wonder about that. But the point is, they do. A lot of these country stores often do have products, and in catalogs like Harriet Carter, right, those kinds of catalogs, they often have products that we have not seen manufactured for many, many years. So that's an interesting tip. Is anybody watching on, what is it, I think the History Channel, that series about, there's 2 series out right now. One of them is about how things are made, and they do a lot with showing machines, showing how things are made with machines. It's just fascinating. But now there's another one that's more of a storytelling kind of structure to the show, less kind of cut and dry, telling the story of like the history of certain things, like the battle between the Good Humor Man and a popsicle brand, for example. That, like last night I watched the battle between Mars and Hershey's, right, and how it came together with the M&M, Murray and Mars, right, the son of Mars guy, right, after he died, made a deal, went to the dragon right behind his family's back and made a deal with the Hershey's guy, whose last name was Murray, That's how we have M&Ms. But these shows are so good for introducing these old products to us and doing this kinds of storytelling. It brings us back to, and I think it pushes these old products and old conversations up to the front, because we're having one right now. We're talking about products, techniques, and things that would be classified probably 20 years ago as kind of old wives' tales, but we're talking about them out loud, and people are saying, yeah, that still works. It's so important to keep this information at the front of our lives, right? Because it turns out a lot of it is true and a lot of it is helpful. So thanks, Crystal. You like those whiskers. How is Oh, yep, that's it, Kira. How it's made is on all the time in your house. Yeah, right. Ask you anything. You're ready for. I was going to say Alex Trebek. That's sad, isn't it? You're ready for a game show of some sort with all that knowledge. And Pat says it was made famous on TV infomercials. Oh, I see. So it's not super old. From Germany. I bought it at Canadian Tire, and I'm carefully using what's left in the tube. Yeah. I mean, isn't that the thing? When you don't know if you can get more of something, you do take it so easy. It becomes like rationed, like, little golden drops. Dave says, I love it too. How it's made, TV programs. It's so cool, isn't it? Such useful TV programs compared to other stuff that's out there. Don't get me started. But I mean, it's so nice to learn and think while you're hooking or punching. So, hey, that was great. If you think of more great tips, please let us know. I'm going to break because I'm going way too late lately, and I love it, but I got to get some work done. So tomorrow, I want to look at this little book that I found, a collection of Charles Rand Penny, Penny, quilts, coverlets, and hooked rugs. So let's look at that. I might put it in tandem. I find these little things at antique stores all the time, and I like to pick them up because they've got really interesting rugs in them. Let's look at that tomorrow. Look at some of those older rugs. Maybe we'll look at another older periodical tomorrow. So tomorrow will be the last Coffee Time episode. Thursday, I'm going to lay low and get some work done. And of course, I'll be back full blast on Friday with cocktail night, and it's our bingo night. Halloween and fall themed bingo night. So if you don't have your cards, I think they're still in the description of the text today, but also on the Facebook group, Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club. We are getting dangerously close to 7,000 members in our group right now. I mean, isn't that fantastic? I'm just so pleased. The group is going so well, and people are learning and asking questions. It's just great. Thank you. Please give a thumbs up. Indeed. All right. Wonderful. I know. Crazy. It's crazy. Hey, I will see you tomorrow. We will have some fun tomorrow talking about rug hooking and old rugs. A little bit of a history angle tomorrow. And remember to get your tickets for bingo this coming Friday night. Have a great day. Until then, I will see you same time tomorrow, noon Eastern Standard Time, Ribbon Candy Hooking Channel. See you soon.